going. Okay. Hello everyone. This is the grant writing workshop for the Small Organization Sustainability Fund. My name's April Bryce, and I'm joined today by Jacqueline Ruiz, who is our arts program assistant with the City of Sacramento's Office of Arts and Culture. Our office is responsible for creative economy grant making and educational programming, as well as the city's art and public places program. We are also joined here by Special Project Managers Ash Ragani, who will be walking this group through the city's new grants management system, which houses this application, and will be the chief point of interface for this award. There's a lot of material here to cover in a very short amount of time, so we're going to do our best to get through it quickly. At any time during this webinar, you can use the Q&A function to type a question, and we will do our best to respond to every question that comes through. We will also add all questions to our FAQ page, which you can find on the grant website. These should be up by early next week. Additionally, we do want to leave time at the end of the webinar for questions, and participants will be given the chance to use the raise their hand feature and that will sort of prompt us to unmute you so that you can ask any remaining questions. I will note that questions about eligibility can be a little tricky to answer in this setting, and I do recommend contacting me directly about eligibility questions so that we can review your unique situation and really ensure that nobody is wasting their time on an application which they might not be eligible for. We will be recording this webinar, so if you miss any part of this webinar, please, you can find the recording on our website. We will have this added likely by early to mid next week. Usually takes a couple of days to get that right on the website. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump on in. This is going to be our agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about the Small Organization Sustainability Fund program, discuss eligibility requirements for this program, review the application process, and Ash is going to walk us through that piece. Then we're going to review some of the application documents that will be required to be uploaded with your application. We will also give some time for application tips, some of our tips and tricks for a complete application. We'll review and discuss the review process. So take a little time to discuss what happens after you submit your application. Then we'll talk through the awarding process and leave plenty of time at the end for any questions that participants may have. Okay, so the Small Organization Sustainability Fund is a new grant opportunity which is designed to reach small arts and cultural organizations throughout Sacramento. This is a opportunity for arts and cultural organizations. It is a one-year grant program providing up to $5,000 in general operating support funds. So this means that this funding is not tied to any project. We don't want you to go out there and design a new project to be utilized or to be funded by this program. This is really designed to fund those activities that you're already doing within your organization. This program is made possible through a partnership with Sacramento County and California Arts Council, which allows funding to be available Sacramento County wide, so not just within the city of Sacramento. So we are excited for that larger reach of this program. The city has allocated $100,000 towards this program, and there is no match requirement for funding, which is great. So you don't have to put funding up in order to have that matched back. This is just a straight grant for general operating purposes. Some of the goals of this grant opportunity is to support the sustainability of Sacramento County small arts and cultural organizations, support organizational commitments to diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, support in the implementation of programming which creates opportunities for artists and or culture bearers, and support development and growth opportunities for artists and culture bearers. This is also designed to support arts and cultural organizations who demonstrate a strong community impact and support organizations that respond to community need through planning and program delivery. Now, the amount that an organization can get from this grant is based on a couple of different factors. So again, the maximum is $5,000, but the actual award amount will be based off of fiscal year 2023 and 2024. You can choose which fiscal year you use. Operating income. And this is the total income minus any support from city or county government. So there is a question where we ask you to list any grants that you've gotten in the fiscal year. The application score will also impact the grant award amount, and that is will be taken into consideration. This is the score that panelists will assign to the application. As will the number of awards issued, that will also be considered. And then the amount allocated towards this grant, which, as we said, was $100,000. So all of this will be factored into a formula, which will help us to allocate funds fairly and evenly to eligible organizations who are selected. Let's see, what's next here? So let's dive into eligibility a little bit. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this section because it's very important. There are limited funds associated with this opportunity, so we do have some very specific eligibility requirements. I will say that, this is just one opportunity. We have opportunities that come around all the time. So while you may not be qualified for this, please keep an eye out on future opportunities. And if you have any questions about eligibility, please feel free to reach out anytime. I do want to make sure that we're thoroughly assessing your eligibility before you dive into that application. So first and foremost, this program is for arts and cultural organizations. This means that your mission or primary purpose and programs center arts and culture. An arts organization has a mission or primary purpose to support the development, production, or presentation of an arts discipline or cultural activity. So, for example, things like dance, theater, visual arts, literary arts, media, film, music, traditional arts, those kinds of things. A cultural organization has a mission or primary purpose to promote, preserve, educate, and or present a specific culture or ethnic tradition. Here, I do want to highlight the guidelines emphasis on the phrase mission or primary purpose. Because, and I'll give you a couple of examples here. So if an organization, for example, provides mental health services, and they also happen to include like a weekly art therapy program, unfortunately, that organization would not be eligible under this program. Another example is, say an organization whose mission focuses on providing meals to seniors, and they happen to offer a once a month art class. This organization would also not be eligible because this goes back to that primary purpose. So, in these cases, the primary purpose would be mental health services, supporting food insecurity, but not so much, the arts. So this kind of goes back to that phrasing. Just keep in mind primary purpose. So if you have any questions, you might want to ask yourself: is arts and culture a primary or a secondary function of my organization? And if you have any doubts, just as I said, please feel free to reach out. We would rather you contact us directly and have a conversation about it than wasting anybody's time doing an application. I do also want to note that this opportunity is available to fiscally sponsored organizations. The purpose of a fiscal sponsorship is to open access to contracting capabilities for small or more emerging organizations who do not have or don't wish to pursue 501c3 tax exempt status. I will emphasize, however, that an application must be provided on behalf of an organization or such as an artist collective or cultural collective. So, for example, an individual artist can't gain a fiscal sponsor and apply for this opportunity. The fiscal sponsee must still be an organization or entity which meets all the eligibility standards. Okay, so let's go ahead and review those eligibility requirements. So federal and state status, an applicant organization or an eligible fiscal sponsor must be a California nonprofit with tax exempt status under 501(c)(3) of the Internal Revenue Code. And they must have good standing with the California Attorney General's Registry of Charities and Trusts and the California Secretary of State. As we discussed, the organization's mission or primary purpose and programs must center arts and culture. They also must have a 1-year history of operating or public programming. The organization must have a primary address within Sacramento County. So, if you have a PO box or something like that, we might need to have a discussion. We are looking for that primary address within Sacramento County. The organization's fiscal year revenue for 2023 or 2024 must be no more than $25,000. And the organization must be in compliance with previous City of Sacramento funded activities, grants, contracts, and that sort of thing. Now, we do recommend that you check with oversight agencies such as the DOJ and the Secretary of State as soon as possible. If there is an issue, we do find that an in-person visit is useful in, expediently addressing some of these issues. So, just check those things as soon as you can to make sure that there's no issues down the line. Okay, so let's talk about some of the ineligible organizations. So unfortunately, this grant is not designed for-profit entities or individual artists who are not affiliated with an organization or an already existing artist or cultural collective. Schools, including student programs, college or university funded programs, schools of the arts, and programs that are embedded in public or private schools or their nonprofit funding arm are also not eligible. And then any organizations that receive 2025 to 2027 Cultural Art Award funding are ineligible. The reason is that this funding is really meant to fill the gap left behind by that program. So we wouldn't want to double up and take that opportunity away from somebody who hasn't received any funding. Okay. If you are applying with an eligible fiscal sponsor, please review the guidelines to ensure that that fiscal sponsor is eligible. There are some requirements for fiscal sponsors under this program. For example, as we talked about, they do have to have 501(c)(3) tax exempt status and be in compliance with all regulatory agencies, such as the California Attorney General's Registry of Charities and Fundraisers and California Secretary of State. They also must have a mission or public or primary purpose and programs which center arts and culture. And they need to have a 2-year history of operating and engagement with the arts at time of application. We also require that fiscal sponsors be located within the limits of Sacramento County as evidenced by their primary address, and that fiscal sponsors are in compliance with all city funded activities, grants, contracts, that sort of thing. Also, there must be a signed fiscal sponsorship agreement between the applicant organization and the fiscal sponsor, which satisfies all of the requirements outlined in the required application section of the guidelines. So just take a peek at that. And again, if you have any questions about eligibility of your organization or your fiscal sponsor, please just feel free to contact me directly and we can walk through that. Okay, so now we're going to take a peek at the application for this grant itself. The city is using a new grants management system, and Ash is going to walk us through some of the features of this system and give us a peek at the application. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that Ash can take over. And the floor is yours, Ash. Go for it.
Thanks, April. Hi, everybody. Ash Regani with the City Manager's Office. I'm responsible for our citywide grants management system. So what I'm showing you today is a recent new system that all departments are going to be transitioning to for all grants citywide. And so that will have the advantage of kind of a uniform look and feel, an account that you can use for all city grant opportunities and all awards that are awarded through these applications. And so when you go to our portal, essentially, it's called grants.cityofsacramento.gov. You're going to see this page. The first thing you're going to want to click on is this grant opportunities icon, or in the navigation menu up at the top. And it's going to show you a list of the open grant opportunities. Since we are focused today on the Small Organization Sustainability Fund, I will go ahead and click on that grant opportunity. And you will notice that it is asking me to log in if I want to actually submit an application. Um, Without logging in, you can see all of these details. You can download the program guidelines. You can see other sorts of information, but really we're getting prompted to log in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. If you don't already have an account, you'll click this sign up now button. You will need a valid email address because it's going to send you a one-time verification code to make sure you can actually receive emails from us. You'll type that code in and your account will be created. Since I already have an account, I'm going to just log in with my saved password. And so now that screen or that message is no longer apparent. And up here on the right side, I'm going to make my screen a little bit bigger. You can see two buttons. One is apply and the other is ask a question. I'm going to go ahead and click the apply button. I'll show you the ask question feature in a little bit. Um, in my case, I've already started an application, so it's basically taken me directly to that application. At the top section here, you just have some basic system information that's related to your application. You don't need to worry about that. I will quickly highlight when you first create an account, it may ask you if you're an organization or an individual. At this point in our system, that is not as important because your organization information will get picked up in the application itself. Just know that if you do try to register for an account as an organization, other users can sign up for an account and belong to that organization. You'll just need to have the unique employment identification number that makes sure that we don't have duplicate organizations in the system. And for those reasons, you'll probably just end up applying as an individual. It's a little bit of a faster sign up process. But I want to focus here on the application checklist. This is really the core of the application. Essentially, each item in the checklist needs to be completed in order to submit a valid application. So for example, if I click this submit application button, it's going to say, hey, you need to complete all of the items in your checklist. And it's not going to allow me to submit. So I know right away I need to start working on these items. So I'm just going to demonstrate a few of these. Overall, it works the same, but I'm going to click here on the eligibility questions item. So I click on work on this item. And initially, it will separate the different questions into different pages. You would click continue to go to the various pages. It's a pretty common set of options with checkboxes, drop-down menus, text boxes, etc. Um, and you can also click show all questions up here on the right if you just want to see all of the questions in a single section. Typically, we do recommend that you complete your application outside of the system in terms of the questions where you need to enter text, and then you can sort of copy and paste from that document into the application itself. Once you're finished, you would click the finish button. In this case, I'm getting flagged as not completing certain required items. So it's just telling me, hey, you can't actually mark this item as complete until you complete all of the required items. So instead, I'm going to click Save and Finish Later. This will save my progress, everything I've entered, but it's going to have this status of incomplete. And so I will need to go back in at a later date. And that's something, if it wasn't already obvious, you can log in and out of the system as many times as you need to up to the application deadline. Just make sure you get your application submitted by the deadline, but it will save your progress as you move along. So again, you would work through all of these application items, complete all the fields. Um, if I did actually complete the items, I would click finish and the status would say complete as opposed to incomplete. Um, let's see, are we doing, okay, these are additional questions. I'm just looking for, a lot of these are form questions. For file uploads, those are in other parts of the section. And so just keep in mind all of the necessary instructions are listed here. This is a special part of the application related to your account profile in the system. So these are things like your Secretary of State registration, your Attorney General Registry of Charitable Trusts, and your IRS tax exempt verification. These are nice, or the convenience offered by this is these documents will be stored as part of your account profile for 12 months. So you can apply to as many grant opportunities as you want, and these documents will carry over to those applications as well. You won't need to re-upload them until 12 months when they expire. From the time that they were originally uploaded, you would just need to upload an updated copy at that point. There are some other things I want to point out here. So we're sort of highlighting that, this section is required for all applicants. This is for all applicants. In this case, this is specifically for fiscally sponsored applicants. And so we do have this note down here. If you're already a 501c3 and not applying as a fiscal sponsor, go ahead and just click the finish button. So I'm going to click work on this item. I'll click continue, 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 and finish. I could have just done the show all questions option and clicked finish, but really it's going to show it's complete. So this is important because if you are a fiscally sponsored organization, technically the system will allow you to have incomplete responses, but just note that that may disqualify your application. So it is really important to read these instructions in each section of the application just to make sure you're checking all the boxes, submitting everything that needs to be submitted. Once you get, actually, I'll cover the work samples real quick. So you can directly upload images and text to the system, text files. So we allow for JPEG, PNG, PDF for images. If it's a text document, you can upload a PDF. You would click work on this item, and then you would find your files. You can drag and drop them or simply click that upload files button. If you're only going to share links, and so I'm going to get to that section in a little bit, that's for video, audio, more multimedia type files that are too large for our system. You would just check this box that says, I am only providing linked media work samples in the next section, and you can mark this section as complete. And so I'll go ahead and show you that second section for linked media. I'll click on work on this item. Essentially, if you need to provide any instructions, there's an optional text box up here. And then the rest of these text fields are, it has link 1, link 2, link 3, and I think up to 5 links you can provide. So again, if there are any instructions, go ahead and provide those up here. When you're finished, click finish. And so at the end, in order to submit your application, all of your checklist items need to be marked as complete. If any of them are incomplete, you're going to get that same warning message that says you need to complete the items. So make sure you get through the entire application, and then you would click submit. If throughout the application period or up to the deadline when we're allowing questions to be submitted, you would click this Ask Question button. You would type your question into the text box. You would click Next. Staff will be notified that you submitted your question. And then as linked from this main, we call this the grant opportunity detail page. This is the page that describes the grant opportunity. You can get to it from your application. There's a section down here called questions and responses, and it says questions and responses will be posted to the Small Organization Sustainability Fund FAQ page. You would click that link, and it would then take you to where the responses are submitted. So just know if you're the one who submitted the question, you will receive an email notification with that response to your question, but also just to provide fair and equal access to the information that we're providing to level the playing field for all applicants. Anyone can view this page that shows all of the questions that have been asked. And it's always a good idea to just check this page as well, just to see if your question was already asked, and then you wouldn't have to submit that as a question. The last item I will share with you back on the application is you can add collaborators. So they would basically view the same, they would get an email notification. They would need to have an account or to sign up for an account. And they will basically see exactly what you're seeing. The most important thing to note is if you're inviting a collaborator, make sure you're both in communication about who's working on what. If two collaborators are working on the same section of the application, the system is just going to pick up the most recently saved changes. And so if two people are editing at the same time and they click the save button around the same time and they don't realize that they're both making edits, the system is just going to pick up the most recent edit that was made, and you may not realize that one collaborator is overriding the changes of another collaborator. So you may not even want to use this feature for that purpose, but if it is important, maybe you just want someone to be able to view the application without your login credentials. You could add them that way. Just make sure they know not to make any edits. So again, once you've completed all these checklist items, you will click the Submit Application button. If you do have any questions, there is a resources page. So I got to that from this More dropdown. We do have a getting started guide. I'll highlight that. So it just covers some of the basic components of the application, creating an account, things like that. But most importantly, if you do need any technical assistance, so earlier we showed the page where you would submit a question. Those are more questions related to the grant program. If you have any technical issues just using the system, you can't figure something out, or you identified some sort of error, send me an email at grants@cityofsacramento.gov, and we will get back to you within a business day. So good luck, everybody, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it back over to April.
Great. Thank you so much, Ash, for your time and for taking us through that application. We're going to go ahead and jump back into the presentation, and yeah, very much appreciate your time, Ash. Thanks again. Okay. All right. We did have a question come in the Q&A that I just wanted to highlight. It says, what if an artist collective, we are an artist collective, but we don't have a legal entity. You may have noticed on the application section where there is that space to upload your certificate of liability, or I'm sorry, your California Secretary of State and California Attorney General's registry, that the proof of registration with that entity, that there wasn't either like an and or. So organization and or fiscal sponsor can upload those documents. So if you are a legal entity, you're eligible and you can put that on there. If you're not a legal entity, that is not an issue. We do just require that there be, that this is an established collective and that you can show, your program history and that sort of thing. So just wanted to highlight that question, and we will add that to our Q&A page on the website. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive back in. I do want to highlight some of the application support materials, which are required to be uploaded with your application. You saw some of those sections where you would upload those materials, and I just wanted to kind of review them together. So we do ask for proof of tax exempt status. So the IRS determination letter is the easiest way to upload that. You can upload that in PDF. Good proof of good standing. So again, this goes back to your California Attorney General's Registry of Charities and Trusts, and the California Secretary of State documentation. So just showing that you're active with those agencies. The program reporting form, which we'll take a quick look at, and I'll show you what that looks like. Work samples, which can be uploaded, as Ash had pointed out, in multiple formats. So as links to offsite documents like YouTube files, things like that, or text and images can be uploaded in that section. And then if applicable, a fiscal sponsorship agreement would be required, and that would be required in a PDF. So this is the program reporting form. This is where you would enter event and programming reporting information for the organization. The form asks that you name the venue or location, a description of the event or program, dates of the event or programs, the street address, city, state, zip, and if information about if the program was served youth or was school-based. This form will be used by panelists in their review, and it will inform the panel's score in areas such as artistic and cultural impact or in community impact. I do want to note that if you have multiple events, for the same type of program, say for example, every second Tuesday you do a dance workshop. We don't expect you to list every single one of those occurrences out. You can use a date range, and just, in the description include when that takes place. So, it could be dance classes every second Tuesday from this date to this date, would be perfectly satisfactory. And again, this is just trying to drill down and help panelists understand some of that artistic impact, cultural impact, and community impact. Next, I want to highlight work samples, which, these are will inform panelists' score in some key areas as well, especially artistic impact, community impact. We're not asking for, flashy professional work samples, but we do want you to to use this opportunity to give panelists a good idea of the type of work that you're doing. So remember that panelists may not have heard of your organization or the great work that you're out there doing. So this is your opportunity to show them what makes your organization special and how your work relates to the panelist scoring rubric. Make sure that work samples, catch the panelist's eye, show your work at its best, demonstrate high standards, drop us into the action. So you don't want, a ton of space before your video where everything's gearing up, drop us right into that action. That's an opportunity where you can use that viewing instructions field in the application to tell us, exactly where you want us to start seeing that video. And then, make sure that the work samples relate to the work, your work to the grant application and to the panelist scoring rubric. It includes clear and concise descriptions and shows the breadth of your work. I do also want to take you through some of the like frequent mistakes with work samples. So, poor sound or image quality, starting a video at the credits, or, as an audience enters the space. Again, we want you to just kind of drop us into that, the heart of the action, and you can use that viewing instructions field to instruct panelists where you want them to start a video, end a video, etc. Sending flyers or posters instead of videos or images, sending slide decks with too many slides, sending promotional videos or a link to your website instead of actual work samples, submitting outdated work samples. We do ask for work samples to be within the last 3 years. Too little or too much information, submitting links with password protection, and also providing like temporary or expired links to make sure that your links are good for a couple months during the process, so that panelists have a chance to review. I will note that there are a couple of work sample um, webinars that we did for past grants. I've included those links here for you so you can check those out and get some more information on work samples. But again, we're not looking for anything like super flashy here. Use what you have. But this is your chance to show the panelists sort of who you are, because panelists will be instructed to sort of stick to the application itself, not go searching and digging for information about about your organization. They'll be instructed to kind of base their decisions based off what's provided. So this is your opportunity to kind of show them what you do in a fun, colorful, and interactive manner. Okay, next I do want to quickly review some application tips. So, plan ahead. Some of the application support materials may require some planning to prepare. You may also find, that an organization or a fiscal sponsor is not active and with Secretary of State or not current with the DOJ. Those sorts of things can be worked out, but you'll need some time. So plan ahead. Applicants are required to complete all eligibility questions. Questions are designed to really closely follow that panelist rubric. And you'll see when you get into the application, almost verbatim, do they follow the panelist rubric. So, review that panelist scoring rubric carefully and make sure that your responses are really tapping into what panelists will be looking at. Use as many or as few words as you need to tell your story. Each of the narrative sections will allow for a character count. It's the equivalent of about 300 words or so. So, I don't there's no expectation that you use all 300 words or all of the characters to tell your story. If you feel that you've captured it, please, feel free to stop writing. So, use as many or as few words as you need to tell your story. Reach out if you have a question or you don't understand a question. We're happy to provide any support or tell you kind of what we're looking for, what we're instructing panelists to look for. Ask someone to read your application before submitting. Sometimes they can catch things that our eyes just glaze over after you've been working on an application for so long. Be as specific as possible and provide examples which demonstrate how the organization addresses the review criteria and that outlined in the panelist scoring rubric. And it's also recommended that you retain digital and hard copies of your completed application for your records. Okay, next I want to talk quickly about the review process. So once your application is submitted, staff will review all applications for eligibility and notify applicants of any issues with their application. A panel of regional and national experts will then review the applications and use a panelist scoring rubric to evaluate each section of the application. They will assign an overall score to that application, and this allows for a fair and equitable assessment of all applications through the same review criteria. Um, Based on the panelists' recommendation, the OAC will create their funding recommendation, and then we will notify awardees using the grants management system. Review panel results won't be made public for this opportunity, so there will not be a public panel for this opportunity. However, we're happy to provide your panel results. Feel free to just email OAC staff or myself or Art Grants at cityofsacramento.org. Any of the contact information that we're going to put here at the end of the presentation, and we'll be happy to get those results to you. So this is the panelist scoring rubric. You can find this on page 10 of the English guidelines. This is what panelists will use in creating their score. As you can see, there are four main criteria areas. And each have a score value dependent on, meeting expectations or exceeding expectations. Here's a closer look at what those review areas and the points value for each of the review criteria. I will note that questions within the application are structured to reflect the panelist scoring rubric very closely. So, take a look at this rubric and really make sure that you have it next to you as you're doing the application so you can see what they're looking for. We're going to review each of the four sections here. So the organization planning section of the panelist criteria, this is, panelists will be looking for evidence of creating and achieving goals for organization sustainability. They will find this information within your narrative answer. They'll also take a look at your workforce composition responses to get that information. They will also be looking for evidence of regular financial planning based on your narrative questions and financial information provided. The next section is the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility section. So panelists will be looking to see that organizations, that your internal structure, internal operations, such as hiring, contracting, board development, etc., that these demonstrate an intentional strategy in support of clear diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility goals. Now, this information will be found within your narrative that you provide, the narrative question. They will also be looking for that your external work demonstrates integration and advancement of stated equity, inclusion, and accessibility goals. So this would be like your programming, your events, and they'll be looking at this information within your narrative response and also your program reporting form. The next section is the artistic and or cultural impact section. Panelists will be looking for evidence that the organization implements arts and or cultural programming, which creates opportunities for artists and culture bearers and or culture bearers. They'll be looking at your narrative response and also the program reporting form and your work samples for evidence of this. They'll also be looking for evidence that the organization supports the development and growth of emerging artists and culture bearers, and they'll be looking for that information within your narrative response. The final section is the community impact section of the rubric. The panel will look for evidence that the organization provides a positive impact within the community where programs and or services are offered. They'll be looking in your narratives, responses, also the program reporting form and your work samples. They'll also look for evidence of understanding community needs and adapting programs or services to meet those needs. They'll find this information within your narrative response, also within your program reporting form and your work samples. So those are the four main review criteria areas. And again, make sure that you have that panelist scoring rubric handy as you're doing your application. It really will help you to frame your answers to ensure that you're providing this evidence for these panelists. Next, I will quickly take us through the awarding process. So we do have a couple of open office hour sessions, which are going to be taking place on November 20th and December 1st from 12 to 1 p.m. If you have any lingering questions or want some one-on-one support, Obviously we can be a little limited in the advice that we do give you. We don't want to, lead you astray. But we will, answer, clarify any questions that you have about the application, or, provide general support. The application will close on December 5th at 11:59 p.m. So make sure that you get your application in at that before that time. Staff will review the applications for eligibility and will reach out to applicants through the grants management system if there are any issues with the application, or if the organization is ineligible and will not be moving to grant review panels. Next, the grant panel will review applications between December 15th and January 16th. We're giving them that full month because we are, running up against the holidays and want to ensure they have plenty of time to make their scoring recommendations. Next, we will have award notification. We'll notify any grantees that of their award, and the funding recommendation provided by the panel and the Office of Arts and Culture. That will take place about 2 weeks following the grant panel reviews, so roughly around January 30th. And then the contract period will begin contracting with organizations after they're notified. Sometimes that process can take a few weeks. There are some steps to become a supplier for the city and register within the supplier portal. These are just general steps that any person doing business with the city must undergo. We'll have a full workshop for grantees to walk them through that process, but the contract period will last roughly between February and March of 2026, depending on when the contract is executed. We anticipate that'll happen sometime in February. And then the contract will end March 2026. All right, so we covered a lot, and I'm sure there are some burning questions. I do want to just kind of check to see if there's anything in the question and answer section here, but also please feel free at this time to raise your hand. We can call on you and have you unmute and answer any remaining questions that you may have. So we'll just leave a little time here. I don't see any hands raised yet. Jacqueline, are there any questions that you see in the Q&A that we should make live for the group?
Yeah, so there's two in the chat. The first one is, are we required to apply for a federal unique identity ID? I read that somewhere. That's the first one.
Great call. No, this is not a federally sponsored grant, so we do not need that SAMS ID. So that's a no.
Cool. And then the next one in the chat is, do we have to be tax exempt to apply for this grant?
You do not have to be tax exempt, but you do have to have a fiscal sponsor who is tax exempt. So fiscal sponsors do have to have, meet our eligibility requirements, and have 501(c)(3) tax exemption status. You don't have to be a legal entity, but you do have to be, an artist collective entity, organization, something doing work within the community, that isn't just an individual artist. So
Perfect. Awesome. And now we can switch over to the Q&A box. There's
great.
quite a few questions in there.
Let's see. We are a nonprofit with no overhead costs, with no salaries or facility costs. We are a project-driven organization where operating income is dictated by the projects we are working on. Expenses are paid through fundraising and in-kind services from industry professionals and academics. So the organization operates debt-free. How should we calculate our adjusted operating income? This is a great question. So we do follow the recommendation from general accounting principles, which says that general general like volunteer support is not typically included in revenue. So the exceptions for that would be, you know, professional services from lawyers drafting a contract, or an architect putting together a plan, or something like that. A professional services is typically from somebody who has like a license to do the work that they're doing. So those kinds of volunteer opportunities can be included in your revenue, but those general volunteer opportunities are, according to general accounting principles, are not typically included. So we recommend that you go back to, you know, the GAAP recommendations for how in-kind services would be included, and use that for calculating your revenue. And then it says what financial documentation would need to be submitted with the application. For most of these organizations, because this is a small organization sustainability fund, most of you are not, filing taxes at the end of the year. You're just filing that simple form saying we made under $50,000. So we're not going to require any documentation, but we are asking that you certify at the end of your application that all information is true and correct, and that you enter the information within the application itself. So okay, I think we got that one. Next, will grant opportunities consider future projects to be completed in 2026? Will grant opportunities consider future projects to be completed in 2026? So this grant will be the contracting and expense window is between the time you contract with the city through end of January 2026, and then you'll do some reporting. The contract will end March 2026. So the funds must be put out the door before the end of that expenditure window, which ends January 31st, 2026. So I think that answers your question, that it does have to be spent, or else you lose that funding. Please remind me, will we not know who received this grant, but we can learn how our organization performed? Also, you said the grant was for general operating purposes. I also need clarification. Okay, yeah, general operating expenses would include, you know, rent, salary, programming supplies for programming that you're already doing out in the community, paying artists, performers, contractors, that sort of thing. All of those are acceptable uses of funding. And I do recommend taking a look at the guidelines. It does have a very thorough breakdown of what can be included and what can't be included in funding uses. So that, you know, is a good way to just kind of get ahead of that. But again, these are general operating expenses, so things that you're already paying for in the community is what we can generally fund, and take a closer look at the guidelines for that. And then please remind me how we will learn how our organization performed. You're welcome to provide an email to us after the panel has finalized their review. All applicants will be notified whether they were funded or not funded. And at that time, you can feel free to email us, and we can provide your panel scores and comments that were made by the panel. Another question, how many applications do you typically review? This is a really tricky one. I mean, it depends on the grant opportunity. So we really don't really have an idea of how many people will apply for this opportunity. You know, that it's really just going to, this is the first time we've done a grant like this. So your guess is really as good as ours, but you know, we'll certainly review all applications that come through thoroughly and ensure that everybody receives, you know, some sort of feedback around their application. Our nonprofit engaged in documenting the history of civil rights and inequality in Sacramento through filmmaking, educational presentations, public presentations, and various organizations such as the City Public Library, Center of Sacramento, etc. Does documentary filmmaking and public education and awareness on local civil rights history qualify as arts and cultural organization. I would say that that certainly falls under the category of film and media. Certainly, certainly an art form, certainly film and media are considered, within those artistic traditions that we are targeting for this grant. I would need to know more information about the organization to know if if, if you're eligible. But based on it, and again, it goes back to that primary purpose. Is this everything that you're doing? Is the sole mission and objective of your organization to create these documentaries and such? Then the answer would certainly be yes. But again, eligibility questions are a little tough to answer in this space. I do recommend that you just give us a call, and we can kind of chat from there. Do you have to be tax exempt to file for this grant? Again, this is, we do allow for fiscally sponsored organizations to apply. And we just ask that the organization is, an entity, artist collective, cultural collective, some sort of organization or entity that is applying, and not like an individual artist or something like that. Can we apply for multiple $5,000 grants? No, this would just be for one grant over the course of a year for for the organization. And again, the award amount is based off of various factors, such as, that we outlined earlier, and you can find in the guidelines. So no, just one application per organization, one grant opportunity per organization. Another question, if we have been selected for the grants, are we also eligible for future City of Sacramento grants? Great question. There are some caveats to this, in that, some grants are tied. For example, this grant opportunity, if you were a applicant with funded under the 2025 to 2027 Cultural Arts Awards, we are not allowing you to participate in this grant. That's only because that funding is very similar to this opportunity, and we don't want to double dip. But it's not a standard rule in the city that one grant per fiscal year or anything like that. We have had multiple organizations, for example. We had many duplicate organizations that were funded under the Arts and Cultural Nonprofit Recovery Fund, and also the Cultural Arts Awards, which ran simultaneously, throughout the year. So over the same time period. So it depends on the opportunity, but that's not generally just like a given within the city. Didn't really understand the answer. Can we apply with a project that will take place in March of 2026? Again, these are general operating funds, so we're not asking, this isn't like a project-based grant that we're funding a project that is taking place at a certain time. These are funds that will be for general operating for work that you're already done, and the expenses must take place within that certain period. So from the time your organization contracts until January 31st, 2026. I'm so sorry. We can talk more if that wasn't clear. Feel free to raise your hand. And one more question before I start calling on folks. What was the spending window if we get the award on 1/30/2026? But do you have to spend the entire amount by March 2026? So we will be providing, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm saying 2026. It's January 2027. So we'll be providing recommendations for funding around January 2026, and then funding must be spent by that next year of January 2027. My apologies. Okay, I am going to go ahead and call on some folks. So I'm going to go ahead and allow Sinan, and please correct my pronunciation. Go ahead, Sinan, you're welcome to speak. Oh, so sorry. I think I remuted you here.
Buenas tardes.
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon. I am the director of a program for seniors. It's a foundation. We are closing our first year as a registered nonprofit in the state of California. We have our relationships with the IRS, with the state. I forget how you identify them. But so we're legit in all three areas. We're registered in California, and we are trying to. We work with white elephants. That's how we raise money, and this is the first time we're trying to apply for grant funds. And it essentially we try to cater to the cultural underpinnings of their experience growing in this country, in the United States, but who are peripheral to mainstream because of their first language being Spanish. We are operating in English and in Spanish. We provide health information. We provide information regarding physical health, social, emotional, and cultural. But at the same time, we are very fixed on the importance of traditions to alter dietary food patterns, changes that need to take place, as well as to keep them engaged with the traditional dances and other traditions that are deeply rooted in who they are. So my concern is there a corner and the diversity that you wish to achieve and reach in working with us? Is it would our organization fit into the rubric that you are working with?
Yeah, again, I would need to know a little bit more about the organization and its structure. Whether the mission and primary purpose is that culturally centered work,
Yeah.
or if it's primarily focused on other areas, for example, providing other services to individuals in the community. It is just a tough one to answer without having all those details. I mean, off the top, it sounds like if you're preserving a cultural tradition, and that is your primary purpose, I would say that that's certainly something that's eligible for this program. But again, I would recommend let's talk offline. Just give me a call or email Art Grants. Just provide, a link to your website or information about your organization, and we can take a closer look.
Okay, what would be the contact information?
You can email artgrants@cityofsacramento.org. And I will be, let me go ahead and flash that up right now. There we go. I just put that up on the screen so you can see it. Okay. I think that takes care of all of the questions. I don't see any unanswered questions in the Q&A. So I think that we got everything covered. Again, we'll be offering some small, office hour sessions, small organization sustainability fund office hour sessions, one on the 20th and one on the 1st. That might be a good opportunity to dive into some of those eligibility questions and really take a peek at your organization, and we can determine eligibility together. So I recommend, if you have any eligibility questions, feel free to join one of those. You can register at the links on our website. You can find updates and information on our website, our social media. Sac City Arts is our handle across most platforms. Email us at artgrants@cityofsacramento, or you can email me directly, abryce@cityofsacramento.org. Feel free to get in touch with us. We're happy to help. We're here to support you, and we're eager to get this grant rolling. So thank you, everyone. This recording will be placed onto our website. So, and again, any unanswered questions, we'll have plenty of opportunities, and we're always here to support. You have a great rest of your day. I hope it's not raining too hard where you are. And thank you, everyone. You have a great one.